Welcome to season 6 of the Breakthrough Show, Breakthroughs Around the World, conversations with 40 guests from 40 different countries in an effort to acknowledge our similarities, honor our differences, and celebrate our connection. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I'm so excited to be here with you for another episode today. I'm thrilled about our guest that's coming on the show today. He is a TEDx speaker. He works in human-centered crisis leadership, which we're going to find out more about. And I know that he has had a book come out recently called Navigating Beyond Crisis. I can't tell you how much I feel that everything we've been through the last couple of years as a nation, as a globe, as a nation, as people, that we need someone like this on the show. So without further ado, representing the country of Austria, please welcome Thomas Lahnthaler to the show. Welcome, Thomas.
Hi, Jessica. Thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you here. And we were talking before the show about, I was practicing in my head 800 times the last name to try to get it right. And we were having a great conversation about names in general.
Yeah, names are special. I mean, they just make people, but they're also really partly unique to the area where you go to. So it's not always easy to figure out how to pronounce them or write them, not least. And I know I have not one of those easy last names. So
yeah. Well, we look at names, and here I think it's a pretty even mix of like consonants and vowels. And when we see lots of H's and lots of things, we're like, what in the world could this be?
Well, in Austria, you don't really pronounce the H's so much. Unless they're in German, basically what we speak in Austria, and unless they're at the beginning of the word, and that's of course confusing for people because that's very different in different languages. So when you see my last name, you see all these H's, and you're like, what to do with them? And I've heard a lot of versions, but you did it perfectly.
Yes, I feel awesome about that. Thank you so much. Well, I'm excited to learn a little bit more about Austria today because, I had a really fun time with Thomas when we met initially. And I said, listen, all I know about Austria is The Sound of Music. And he said,
I don't know The Sound of Music. I've never seen it.
We're all shocked, and we need to know why. This is the thing. But tell us what you love most about Austria, Thomas.
Well, Austria is, of course, the country. I don't live in Austria anymore to begin with. I live in Norway, but I have lived most of my life in Austria, and I'm born there, and I grew up there. And this is just a place where I feel most connected to. In a way, it's the place where my shoulders go down, and I had the privilege of on the one hand getting to know Austria growing up there, living there, but then also in a way get to know it for a second time from the outside. As almost a person that looks from the outside on the culture, on the people coming back, having this comparison coming from countries abroad. So I love the Austrian sense of humor. It's slightly sarcastic, and it's something to get used to, but it's always there, no matter. We're not taking ourselves too seriously on all levels, and I really like that about us. But I also really enjoy the hospitality. So it's very easy to come in a person's living room and just sit down, even if you don't know these people. There's actually these bed and breakfasts they're very common in Austria, but really in a way where you basically end up eating breakfast with the family in their kitchen and their dining rooms and stuff. So it's very personal. It's very personal space is rather open and inviting. And I think Austria is a beautiful country. I mean, very objectively speaking, also it has pretty much everything except for the sea. It's a landlocked country, but it's very green. It has the Alps, which are of course spectacular for those who've seen it, and it has lots of forests and green. And I really realized when I lived abroad that that's what I need. I need green around me. I need this color. So I've also lived in countries where that's not the case, but that's definitely something that's very special in Austria as well.
I love that. I love it. And of course, we mentioned The Sound of Music. Many of us can now see Maria on the hill spinning around, and we know it's beautiful. head as well. But I love how you talk about the people. And I will be very obviously we're going to get into your story and what you do for work a little bit later on. But I I have been very frustrated, bewildered, saddened lately by different events that have gone on around the world. And we, as many humans, have used it as a means to divide us. Yet, in these conversations that I've had here on this show, every single person that has been the theme is how amazing the people are, how
Mm.
welcoming the people are. And I want to see this so bad on a day-to-day basis. I want to see us come together more than what we are right now. And so it's very, I think these conversations keep me grounded in a sense, when I see so much craziness going on online, and I go, okay, but every week I talk to somebody and every week they tell me how amazing the people are, so it kind of keeps it in my head for me. Has there been any differences in culture for you going from Austria to where you are now in Norway?
It wasn't it wasn't a direct line, also, so to say. I
Mm,
have had several stops in different countries along the way, but I just want to really second what you've just said. I
yeah.
think people are at the core of it all. I mean, you
Mm,
said before that I work with human-centered crisis management, so this human-centered is almost the core piece of basically my work, because it's all about connections for me. It's the ones that can change it, the ones that can reverse decisions, the ones that can make a difference and really change the world for the better is us. It's us
mm,
people. So if we're not sticking together, if we're giving up and believe that at the core we all want this, we all really actually want positive change, we all want peaceful life, then what's left? So I think it's important to really keep that focus. There is, of course, a cultural difference between the countries, but and it's more about, for me, the expression of those needs, because the needs are the same.
mm,
The people want the same in Norway as they want in Austria, and maybe Austria, similarity maybe between the two countries is the endurance, right? So
mm.
Austrians, they complain a lot. We complain a lot, really. I mean, we find the hair in the soup in the Maldives on an island because this is what we focus on. But
Yeah.
at the same time, we also have we have endurance, right? We move on. We're not getting stuck.
Mm,
We just keep going on, and it's very similar in Norway, even though they have a bit of a different mindset here, because the mindset here is that no matter how bad it is, there you will always find something good. So it's
mm.
reverse, and they're also very high levels of endurance, and I've seen that basically in many places in the world. Endurance combined with resilience. Some say it's a part of it. Some say it's an extra add-on. But for me, those two are very linked. So resilience is something that anyway all humans, I think, have in common, and we just have to not forget that.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything that Austria do you feel like it's particularly known for? Like, because there are certain places even in the States where you'll go to a state and you'll say, this is the food that you have to have when you go to the state, or this is the place you must visit, like something it's known for. What do you feel like, if anything, that there is of that in Austria?
Arnold Schwarzenegger,
Yeah.
that, of course, but and he's very close to from where I was born.
I love it.
But, but and the Sound of Music, which is technically Austrian, but of course there's a few things, but those things are so there's either the things that are known globally, like
Mm,
Mozart, right? Or
mm,
there's the hidden treasures, and Austria is one of these places that, for example, gets easily thrown into the same basket as Germany.
mm,
I mean, the difference is like between Canada and the US. It's or
right.
even within states in the US, right? The individual states, where there's huge cultural difference, and it's the same between Germany and Austria, for example, and the same between Switzerland and Austria as well. And it's very difficult to say what Austria is known for, because a lot of people discover, for example, the amazing cuisine when you get there. Most people
Mm,
know schnitzel, right? But that's something that, yeah, you might have heard of. But the cuisine is vast, and particularly on the sweet side, pastry,
mm.
cakes. It's vast, but also
I don't need to come there, Thomas.
well, you have to. There's like um, and also there's wines, for example,
Mm,
incredible wines. They're not as famous as the Italian or
right.
French wines, or even the Californian wines, for example, but they're very very popular amongst connoisseurs, right? So
Mm,
really people will know that, and of course skiing. So there's things about Austria that people know, but it's hard to say that there's something everybody knows
right.
because there's so much to discover, and Austria is very very small, but it's very diverse. So there's
Mm.
like 9 counties, right, or 9 provinces, so to say, and they're all very different in their dialect, very different in their culture, very different in their um, geography, not least, and that all impacts, of course, what they are known for and what's special there.
I love that. And it sounds to me like when people come there, or even if they're from there, everybody comes away with a sort of different perspective of what
Yeah,
they like and what their things are that they remember. And I love the bit about the wine too, because even here, like people think about, okay, is it from Italy or France or California? And that's really all you hear about. But even here in Alabama, there is, for example, a blueberry wine that comes from Morgan. I think it's called Morgan Vineyards. That is just delicious. It's a dessert wine. It's not something you would want to have like a cake and the wine. You'd want to have just
yeah,
the wine. But it's incredible, and you just nobody talks about it because it's just this little family, vineyard here in Alabama. But so I love that too. That's something that you notice as well. Um, is there anything in particular that if someone said to you, okay, I'm going to Austria, what is your favorite place? What is something you would want me to see if I visited?
it's not Vienna.
Yeah.
Vienna is great, right? Vienna is great, of course, but it's
Yeah.
funny. We in Austria have this saying, the ones who are not from Vienna have this saying, like there's Austria and then there's Vienna. And
Mm,
Vienna, of course, has a lot of culture and a lot of history about that that is very strongly related, but it's also waterhead, right? Vienna is almost 2 million people, while in all of Austria is about 9. So
mm.
you see the relation, right? The next biggest city is the city where I come from, which is called Graz, and that's 300,000 people. So you see already a
Wow.
difference. But sure, check out Vienna. It was more of a joke, but if you really want to see Austrian roots and culture, then it's not so big. Drive a bit around, but particularly one area which I find is, for me, it's arguably one of the most beautiful places on earth, which is called Ausseerland. It's the heart of Austria, and there's mountains, there's lakes, and there's tradition. Like people would really walk literally around with lederhosen
Mm.
on a daily basis. So it's not very special there in the sense of for special occasions or for the
Wow.
Oktoberfest, as it's often rumors, but people have that as their clothes because it's just so down to earth. Everybody knows everybody. It's you immediately connected to nature, and it's basically the time stands still there, and that's really like
Wow.
if people are, since people know Sound of Music, this is you feel like you're in Sound of Music without the music.
Mm.
Um, but this is definitely a place that you have to see. Of course, I also recommend the Alps, which are amazing and beautiful. But then I'm very biased to the area where I'm from, which is the volcano area. So it's very difficult to come up with one place.
Wow.
I feel they all have their charm and are special.
Just take a couple weeks off and tour the whole thing. That's
Needs 3 weeks and you're through the whole country. You can tick the box and you can move on.
I love it. I love it.
Breakthroughs are about more than you might think. They're about discovering who you are, digging deep, reaching to the core of your soul. They're about healing. Healing yourself, understanding your beliefs, creating a ripple effect. And it's not just those initial moments that matter. It's about using them to bring more joy into our own lives and the lives of others. It's about having fun, letting loose, enjoying every moment life has to offer. It's about finding a safe space. It's about creating connection. Join us each and every day for exclusive programming, special events, and a community to call home, where we invite you to explore, change the way you look at and live your life and go beyond the breakthrough. So we ask you, are you ready? We'll see you online at thebreakthroughshow.com.
Well, I'm excited to get into talking with you a little bit about the work that you do in the world. So, human-centered crisis leadership. Start by telling us, what exactly does that mean, Thomas?
For me, this is basically, I've been working with crisis and crisis management for the past 15 years, primarily humanitarian crisis management. In other words, that's responding to if there's an earthquake somewhere, or a tsunami, or a typhoon, or anything else of that matter, responding to these emergency operations with different humanitarian actors, whether it's the UN or whether it's the Red Cross and Red Crescent movement. This is what I've been doing for the past 15 years. And for the past 5 years, I've been doing it as an independent, and have also started to focus more on passing on my skills and really shaping a little bit the future emerging leaders in that field, but also outside that field. I needed also a break from humanitarian operations because it gets very much to your energy level. I was really striving at a burnout because you're constantly on high pace. You have very little breaks if you're not very careful. So I just needed to reshape a little bit my life, also because I'm now father of two, and they're very small. They're 3 and 8. So being long time in field operations, as it's called, is not really an option anymore. And also I needed a break from that field. So what I've done is I have looked into other ways. So first of all, skill development. And of course, coming from the crisis field, it's natural to work a lot with that topic, even though I've worked with others. I'm also a facilitator in that sense, but everything is impacted by my crisis work. And the reason why I call this human-centered is because when I started to write my book, which was about 1.5 years ago, I was asked at the beginning of the pandemic a lot. So what would you do? How should we approach this? It's going to be a large-scale crisis. How do you approach this? And I struggled to put this in words, what I do. I just knew I approach it a bit differently than the traditional crisis management field. Planning and risk assessments and all those things. So I started to write, and then the more I wrote, the more I understood that for me, every crisis is about one thing, and that's people. No matter how we turn it, like for me, crisis is almost a human phenomenon because they exist outside the human sphere, but they wouldn't be crisis if we wouldn't label it as such. We wouldn't label it as such if people weren't affected by it.
Right.
And ultimately, it's people managing and dealing with it. A little bit what we discussed just before. And that's also why I think you should focus less on the situation and more on really the human dynamics within it, because the situation very quickly changes anyway all the time. And I see a lot that people get stuck on, for example, restrictions that come with the pandemic. Great, there's nothing I can do about this. But the people are affected, and people that are affected have emotional reactions, including myself.
Right.
So you have to really, that's why focus needs to be on the people dynamics, on the effect it has on people, on the responses we have, and on the options we can create. And that's why that's a little bit of a different focus than the traditional crisis management field has. And I work with leaders and companies to really to change their mindset a little bit in that direction and get them crisis ready, so to say, through habits, to basically focus on human dynamics rather than plans and assumptions.
Right. I have so many questions. I'm trying to figure out which direction I want to go. I think the first thing I would like to ask, because we're already sort of on that topic, is obviously we encounter crisis on a moment-to-moment basis. There's always something going on globally. And how, as a human, as a father, how do you stay grounded in all of that? How do you not internalize all of this stuff that you're encountering on a daily basis?
Part, of course, for me is practice, but I'm also not immune against it, right? So there's a few very, very concrete things that I always advise. One of them is drop the word crisis. So what does it really describe? Crisis describes a period or a situation, but it doesn't necessarily give you any additional information. However, on the other hand, we have a strong response to the term crisis. We relate it either to our previous experiences, we're influenced by how it's used, meaning like an escalation of a situation, time pressure on a situation, something that's really urgent, and that all triggers something in us. So I really recommend to just avoid the term crisis as long as we can, because ultimately what it is the period where we have to make decisions, and change is inevitable. This is basically the core idea of what a crisis is. So if you let the label, if you make the label disappear, you already have less emotional response and you're calmer. Second is, it's what I call focus on your scope of influence or scope of leverage. And that's something that we very, very rarely do. So we very easily get distracted by things we can't influence. And that, of course, that costs energy. It makes us frustrated because we don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. And to relate to what you said, we have the feeling of losing control. So the key is to refocus on the things you can influence. There's always something, even in the pandemic, in the home office, you know, the walls coming, they're closing in on you. You have something you can do. You can go out, you know, open a window, exercise a bit, change a habit around. So there's always things you have an influence over. That might not be the big crisis, but it might be for you to keep sane, to keep that armor up, that not everything goes on the inside. So those are very simple things. And maybe a third tip, very quickly, is what I call anchoring. People might be familiar with Charlie Brown, the cartoon, and the best friend of Charlie Brown is Linus.
Yes.
Linus always carries a blanket. And that blanket has just one function. That's his safety net. And if you watch small children, they walk around with things in their hands a lot. When they go from the house to the car, for example, they have something in their hand. That's also the only function that is an anchor. An anchor is something that we can control. And as adults, we do the same. When we have a presentation and we hold a pen, or we hold the remote control for a PowerPoint presentation, for example, for the beamer, same function. And you can actually intentionally do this with your family or your team or yourself. You find anchors that can be songs, jokes, catchphrases, things that just bring you back to the here and now. Because in the here and now, you can control things. Tomorrow, yesterday, there's nothing you can do. But here and now, you always have options, and that gives you a feeling of control.
So good. That in itself, I feel like if we just focused on those three things, we could really have a very different perspective over any challenge that we face in our lives. I was reminded this morning by a friend on my Facebook newsfeed. They talked about how their mother used to say, the only thing that's essentially guaranteed in our lives is change. And so if we just view that and understand that, then we can go, okay, this is just change. This is just something else is coming. It doesn't take away sometimes, I think, our reacting in any given moment. But I love the things that you're sharing. And it reminds me too of my first ebook that I wrote was called Coping Through Change. And it was a very short book that I wrote when my brother passed away, because it changed so much of my life. And I talked about, in a different way, those things that you're referring to, about finding those anchor things and focusing on the things you can control in your world and changing your language. When you said to drop the word crisis, I'm like, of course, because when we hear crisis, we start to feel like we're in a crisis, right?
I mean, communication is so important. We've done a little experiment a while back with groups of people where we split them in two and gave them the exact same situation, a crisis situation that was just formulated very differently. Their task was a sort of a role play where they had to give a short memo in response to that, what they would do. It was like a management team, for example. The situation was the very same, crisis clearly defined, but one memo was very positively. So it was honest, but it was positive, saying like, this is a difficult situation. We don't have much information, but we're sure we can create our own options. We can take this as a jumping board. We can move on from this better than we were before. The other one was very careful in the sense of, we don't really know much yet. We have to wait until we get more information, and so on and so on. The memos were like they would have responded to two different situations. And it was all in the language. One was very careful. We don't know much yet. We're going to wait and see. The other one already made out a plan and a couple of ideas what they would do, not even knowing the situation. So it was simply this empowerment. So there's so much in communication, as you also said. And I think dropping the word crisis, because it's also politically and it's really like an instrument these days that can, really influence the different sides and actually alert people on different subjects. So it's not really a general term anymore, and we all interpret different things. Dropping that makes a huge difference.
I love that. I love that. I want to backtrack now and ask you a little bit about your history. How did you get into this work, and what made you passionate about it to begin with?
I got into this work through a little bit of a detour. I originally wanted to become a war reporter. So I wanted to work in conflict zones that I had. But then I very quickly, through a summer camp or summer school, got introduced to the topic of mediation and conflict resolution. And that's when I decided I want to go that path. As it turns out, that was basically then also my education. And then it took me a little bit to find a job. And I got in touch with people that worked in the humanitarian sphere. And I got my first, basically it was an internship. I got a little bit of pocket money, but it was more or less an internship. Still the best job I've ever had in South Africa. I was basically traveling around small villages and having really this almost this movie scene where you show up in a little village and the little kids come running and touch your skin because they haven't seen so many white people, if any, in their life. And that just made an impact on me because I met the people. I saw poverty to an extent that I'd never even could imagine it before. So that made a huge impact on myself. And I just really got the drive to make a difference, to somehow contribute to making a difference. And from then on, it was basically, I got a job in Afghanistan. So I worked there for 2.5 years, conflict zone with my background, and worked a little bit there on peace building and on crisis management. And from then on, it was basically just a really moving between contexts. So I was in Syria, I was in DRC Congo, I was in different war zones. And then when family time happened, I met my wife also outside in the field. We both decided that we would just settle down for a little bit, for a year. And that was 10 years ago. And yeah, the 1 year became quickly 10 and 2 children and settling down in Norway. And yeah, this is how it is. We don't
see how that happens. I can totally relate to that. Even, my husband and I down here in the South, we were both had come out of relationships and then met each other. And we were not really being held here by anything, but we said, okay, we'll just take a little while. And here we are 12 years later. Now it's time to go. It's interesting how that happens, though, for sure. But I love how you got into the work that you're doing. And is there anything in particular that keeps you passionate about the work on a day-to-day basis? Like, what is it that keeps that drive for you to keep moving forward?
Learning. It's as simple as that. I think I'm one of these hungry, curious people. I just can't get enough of different perspectives, making new connections like ours, right? Was beautiful introduction. So just really making new, meaningful connections. And I believe that almost every connection is a meaningful one, because either way, even if you end up not connecting further, you take something away from it. And I've learned so much from my path. I've worked with indigenous people many steps of the way, which is really something that changed my view on life completely. And which is also the concepts, to the extent that I could understand them, are also concepts that I'm trying to integrate into my work, my trainings, my leadership philosophy, and the way I approach life. So I think it's all about this, knowing there's so much more. Right. So yeah, I've seen a fraction of the world, as I have seen much, right? This is not what I'm saying, but there's so much more, and I'm so hungry for it. Yeah. And this is the drive. This is what keeps me going. And the best advice that I ever got was, before I even got into the field, was when someone said to me, I know you want to change the world, but start with small changes. And if you make a difference for one person, positive difference for one person, however small, you've already made a difference. Because if you start on the other end, you can only lose. And that was one of the most valuable advices I've ever got, because when you work in difficult situations where the suffering is overwhelming, and you want to help everywhere at the same time, you will not make it. But these small steps, they actually turn into bigger changes and bigger impacts that you think, and they keep you going, and they actually really, they contribute to motivation and drive.
I think curiosity is something that we've heard about often on this show, like a curiosity for life and for our fellow humans, as being a driving force behind what we do in this world. And so I think that's a great thing, to be curious and open-minded. And another thing that I think is a a frequent theme on this show is something that you mentioned when we talked before, and that is being empowered, and feeling empowered. Have you always felt empowered in your life, or is that something that was a later on thing?
That was a later on thing.
Mm-hmm.
I felt quite confident, but looking back, I don't think I was empowered, because the only one that actually can empower me is myself, and I don't think I've given myself that space. But I have, and that's also funny enough related to Austria. Because I'm from Austria, I've had actually one of those situations that life or destiny or fate throws at you, because I was really in a bad place after I came out of Afghanistan, and I didn't know what to do with myself. So I sat on the sofa the whole day, Googling things, and just really didn't know where to move on, because I had a lot to digest, and was a bit disillusioned. And then I came across something that's called traditional leadership and mediation training with the Aborigines on a small island outside of Australia. And I applied because it was an open call, and I applied. It was after the deadline, so I never thought I would hear anything. And then to my surprise, got invited. And when I came there, we were all surprised because I was the only non-Australian. And then I realized that they hadn't read my application properly, because Austria and Australia is almost the same. So they didn't really think that somebody from Austria would apply for this. So I was invited for it, and it was 3 weeks that completely changed my life, from the beginning to the end. It gave me a completely different perspective. The way it was designed, it forced me to give myself answers that I was very quick in asking. I was very quick in asking other people and looking for answers there. But the way they designed this, and the way the Aborigines approach learning is through not asking questions. So we weren't allowed to ask questions, but we were so desperate for answers. And then there's only one place left to look, and that's yourself.
Right. And
that was, for example, a incredibly empowering moment, because I had to reflect, what is leadership for me even? How do I deal with conflicts? What do my values when I throw respect out, trust, and those things? What do they mean for me? What characteristics do they have? And that just really grounded me in the sense that when I have conversations about these topics now, it's not about, and I don't need to convince anybody what leadership is. I would never define leadership, what that is. I know it for myself, but I don't believe in universal definitions of those things. It's rather really, that's where the curiosity comes in again. Explore what others think, and really just think like, oh, Jessica, what do you think is leadership for you? What is for you leadership? What characterizes it, right? Because this is what I found out for myself. And this way my experience is that your reality expands so much, because you put a mosaic, you put almost a puzzle together, because you might say something, oh yeah, I like that. I take that into my piece. I might say something where like, oh, I never thought of it that way. I add that to mine. And that's a completely different conversation. And that's empowering, because you build your own quotation, and it's not somebody else telling you this is it, or this is how it has to be. And that was a life-changing moment. And I'm not talking about half naked dancing in front of people, which was the second week of the whole thing. But
oh no, let's rewind and talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, well, what happened basically was that this first week of really going into self-reflection, forced by not being able to get the answers that we wanted, they only would say like, observe, listen, and learn. So this is basically the approach to learning that the Aborigines taught us. And the second week, we were just called into the bush. In the bush, some men and women separately, and then in the bush we just were told, undress. And we were like, okay. So we undressed all till our underwear, and we're like, undress. Okay, so we all undressed, and they gave us this little cloth, really, what was it? I don't know how many inches, but 20 by 40 centimeters, whatever. So we could cover ourselves somehow with a lot of creativity. And then we already heard this rhythm, and we were tasked to, put trees and leaves on us, and we were painted. And then the only thing we were told is, now your task is to dance. Of course, we asked, what should we dance? And same question, observe, listen, learn. So we moved out of the bush, and then there were 1,000 or 2,000 people sitting. They came from all the villages. It was one of their biggest festivals in the year. And the idea was that the rhythms that the elders would make, they would symbolize different elements of nature. So that would be either animals, right? It would be a certain type of fish, or a certain type of tree, or a certain type of weather. And we had to dance these moves. And the young Aborigine boys, they basically, they knew the moves. So we had to just study from them. But that wasn't all. You had to also really show that you're ready for leadership. So you had to push into the front row and not just observe in the back. And they wouldn't stop. So we had to repeat this until we were synchronized, and then a new rhythm would come. So this was about 5 days every day, 6 to 8 hours. That whole ritual, and at the end of it, you would, of course, completely exhausted in the evening, you would just eat in silence, and we had made a symbol on the floor, and this symbol basically would be the eye of the earth, so to say, and you would, all your bad feelings, all your bad emotions that you carry, conflicts that you have, you would give them back to where it comes from, and that's the earth. That's basically the whole existence. And the reason why that's so effective is because you're so exhausted that all your guards are down. So you can access your negative emotions directly and really grab them and say, like, you know what? I have no space for you right now. I'm too tired, and you leave it behind. It's almost like a cleansing ritual. And that was, also this is best I can describe it. But of course, that was way more intense experiencing it. But yeah.
Wow.
Like,
Wow, that's amazing. I can't even imagine. We would have to be out there a long time because I would still be in the back row somewhere is where I would be.
they would push you. They would keep also saying like, no, come forward. And, they want to see that you're ready for this leadership. That's what they see, that you push forward. It doesn't have to be perfect, your dance. It's just also really, I'm ready. I'm throwing myself out there. And you don't have to be in the first row, of course, all the time, because we were too many people anyway, but you just have to show and indicate, I'm ready to take this step forward, however far it goes. And it was just beautiful and also empowering.
Yeah. So I have to ask you, because being a parent myself, do you always feel empowered when it comes to your parenting?
No. Parenting is, for me, is arguably one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my life. Also because we've had this pre-conversation a little bit. It doesn't stop. It's like one of those things that you think you figured out, and it's completely different the next day when you wake up. So it's I call it often crisis management in action, because that's what it is. It's that constant change that you say. So I can look upon this as really a crisis and focus on what's going to happen next. That's what we often do, right? We try to fill the unknown with our assumptions. Or I can just follow my children. And you mentioned the TEDx before. I'm a huge fan of learning from children, particularly my two. And I have actually, my TEDx was about the topic, why reconnecting to our inner child is a superpower in a crisis. I learned so much from them, because we must not forget, they live in the unknown. For them, everything is new, right? Even when they know something, they find new things every day, because they discover the world, they learn about it. And the way they approach it is in the here and now. They're the masters of that. And looking at them, how they handle the situation, we can learn so much from what we can do as adults. And it's not even learning, it's just remembering that we've had these skills, because we were also children once, right? So we all have these skills. And it's just letting go of sometimes of our overthinking of things, and makes life a lot easier in many ways.
Yeah. I mean, I can definitely see the importance of doing your TEDx on that, because even, they tell you you're the combination of the 5 people you spend the most time with, or something like that. I always joke when people say that. I say, well, I have 6 kids, so I'm basically a child is what it is. But I've always been, since I was younger, and I never really grew out of it, so to speak. I've always been kind of naive in how I look at the world, and sometimes maybe to a fault, but I think a lot of times it can be a little refreshing as well, because I don't take everything so seriously. And even when it comes to, like, with my teenagers, having conversations where we're in this time now where everybody wants to put you in a box and put a label on you and say, this is what you are. And I have told them from the beginning, don't subscribe to any of that. You just be who you are. Just be who. You don't have to put a label on yourself. You don't have to just be who you are, and that's enough, and that's okay. And it's a little bit different than what we see out there. Like I said, everybody wants you to be a certain thing and fit in a certain mold. And so I pulled them out of school and started homeschooling, and that was how that went. But it's I feel very similar, that my children remind me often to stay grounded and to look at things differently and to tap into that inner child. How has your being a parent influenced your work at all?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have, on the one hand, I've of course become more. I also understood the need to ground myself more. I was really a drifter before, right? I was at home everywhere. in that
Yeah.
sense. So if we had had this conversation 10 years ago about Austria, I would have probably answered differently, because I had
Right.
left not long before that, and I was a bit like, yeah, it's time to see the world, so I'm feeling at home everywhere. And this
Mm.
is also how I try to approach it, because of my curiosity. I try to really be at home everywhere. But so I really needed to understand that I also need to ground myself more. The pandemic has, in a way, forced me to do this now, right? Because there was
Mm.
no travel, so I was at home a lot, and I spent a lot of time with my children, and that then really gave me the opportunity to look at them and observe them, and see this. How do you? My first idea was, how do you deal with this pandemic? And then I thought, like, they don't even know what a pandemic is. So for
Right.
them, it's not a pandemic that they're dealing with. They're dealing with, okay, all of a sudden in kindergarten or in school, we're not allowed to play with the kids from the other group anymore. That's
Right.
their pandemic, right? So, and they still had to adjust and still had to adapt. And I just looked at what that is, and a lot of the things that I took out of this is helped me to define the way I approach crisis, because it's very similar to that. It's very,
Mm.
I like to. I mean, I'm a huge fan of MacGyver, and
Mm.
I think that's the best way to approach crises, right? It's about, we have all the resources to take. So, I mean, I have that mindset: whatever you have is all you need. You don't need more
Mm.
than that, because that it's very quickly saying, like, oh, I wish I had that and I wish I had that, but we
Right.
don't. It's distracting. We have what we have. Children are perfect at that.
Yeah.
They use what they have, and they're so creative in how to do that. And watching them doing it, it's really, it made me understand, like, yes, there's a reason I don't like plans, because they lock me in a certain path that might not even happen. They
Mm.
put me in a direction that I might not even want to go. Following ideas, on the other hand, it's a different way to approach the exact same process, in a way, but I think differently about it. I have an idea, I
Mm.
follow up, doesn't work, I change. And as you said before, it's constant change, and crisis is nothing, in a way, nothing else than peaks of these changes, right? When it's inevitable, when we have to do
Mm.
something, but what we forget is that we can decide about which direction it goes. And
Yeah.
and that's the superpower once we remember that.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that this is going to be a bit of a big question, but when you look at the world, what do you hope to see in the future where this crisis management is concerned? What do you hope to see us get better at as humans?
I hope to see us getting better at feeling interconnected again,
Mm.
because this is the only way we can get through crisis, and we will face way more in the coming years. I'm sorry to say that, and it's not the problem now. Is that we're still focused on protecting our autonomy, right? So
Right.
one of the biggest conflict issues and roots of conflict in that sense is if somebody interferes with the autonomy. If you see now what's happening in the Ukraine, right? That's basically rooted in that the aggressor in that sense was feeling threatened in their autonomy and in their, in their way of living. And if we think of that, and also what the pandemic did, right? Pandemic, I
Yeah.
mean, we were very quick in all of a sudden closing the border again, that we had worked for decades, centuries to open up, particularly in Europe, for
Mm.
example, or even within the US, right? When where now the divides get bigger again. So my hope is that I see this interconnectedness, that we understand, like, we are, sure, we are all different, right? Which is also our biggest advantage, but we are one species, and if
Yeah.
we want to survive this, we can only do it all together. If we don't understand that, we will not survive it. Alone, nobody will survive. I've seen this in every crisis context I was. People have so much resilience because they have put their individual needs behind the collective ones. But
Mm.
this is how they stand in 30 years of conflict, 50 years of conflict. They're still there. They're hanging in. They're making the best out of it because
Yeah.
of this interconnectedness. And this is what I sadly see is, in a way, is challenged at the moment, quite
Yeah.
heavy.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I appreciate your perspective on that, and I absolutely echo your thoughts of that as well. I mean, that's the biggest thing for me right now is just the struggle that I see, the division happening over literally everything. And how will we get things done if we can't even have a conversation without going off the deep end, you know? So I really appreciate that.
Imagine a world where every child gets a great education. Educating all children is the only way to end poverty. This is what the Weiss Scholarship Foundation is working to accomplish. Our 6 staff members, our mentors and coordinators, who are on the ground in Kenya, are totally engaged in every aspect of our students' lives, so we can give them every opportunity for success. In just a few short years, we have already awarded 141 scholarships. We send children to high school who would have never gone without our support. And then we help them go on to either university or vocational school. We have already scaled our holistic business model to 4 locations and are ready to scale it to many more. Today it's Kenya, but tomorrow it's more countries. Please contribute what you can today. You can make a one-time donation, a recurring donation, or choose to sponsor a child all on your own for all 4 years of high school for just $3,500. Go to our website, www.weisscholarshipfoundation.org.
I'm excited to switch gears a little bit and get to our 10 fun questions today. Are you ready for it?
Bring it on.
Okay, here we go. Number 1, what is your morning beverage of choice?
Water. Actually, I
Good
stopped drinking coffee at the beginning of the year and haven't returned. So
nice. Very good. Very good. All right. Number 2, when are you most productive?
now, this time of the day, which is in my world 8:45 p.m.
Night. See, I'm asleep. I'm an early bird for sure. My first show I do in the morning is at 7 a.m. So
Okay. I have to get up at 7 a.m. now because of the kids. So for me, this is a little bit of a challenge, but this is where my brain starts working because they're in bed. So it's quiet.
Right. All right. Number 3, which season is your favorite?
Fall.
Me too. All right. Number 4, what is something you're learning right now?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I learned a lot of things. I'm learning right now how to not be shy talking about myself with my book. So I have to really throw myself out there and talk a lot about myself, which is something that I'm still learning, and it's uncomfortable, but it gets better.
Well, you're doing a good job. You're doing a good
Appreciate
job.
that.
All right. Number 5, when you were in school, what were your best and worst subjects?
My best subjects were physical education, I think you call it in the US, or gym, and psychology. And my worst subjects were music and I think mathematics, I'd have to say.
I think we completely flip-flopped there. It was absolutely music was the best. And I got a doctor's note to get out of gym class. So there was that. All right. Number 6, what scares you?
Anything happening to my kids. That's
Agree.
I think that's the only thing that really scares me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Number 7, have you ever been in love?
Yes, I have been in love.
Very good.
Deeply and intensely.
Yes, I love it. I feel like anybody who does a lot of the humanitarian work really experiences love on a different, and a big way.
It's very extreme, the field. You're right. I mean, there's you live extreme, right? You see a lot of poverty and are confronted with that, and then there's a lot of emotions and intensity and closeness and
Yeah, for sure. All right, number 8, what inspires you?
Meeting people, listening to people think differently, to just new thoughts, transfer of knowledge between sectors, so just learning in general in a way, and meaningful encounters.
Yeah, very good. All right, number 9, if you have any, how do you enjoy your downtime or your free time?
I do. I've gotten a lot better at that now. I've started a new hobby, which is stand-up paddleboarding, which I quite enjoy. I'm definitely outside a lot. I used to do a lot of ball sports like soccer and tennis, but with age, my knees started to say they want to have a break, so I have to take it a bit easier. But I'm trying to be outside a lot, connecting with nature.
Very good. Very good. All right. Lastly, number 10, which culture do you deeply respect and or want to learn more about other than your own?
The Maori culture.
Interesting.
It's fascinating to me. I've read about it. I met Maoris. It has to be an indigenous culture because this is just where I kind of rooted, where I'm rooted at. And I think their way of looking at things just really resonates a lot with me. But plus, the way of telling stories is just something that fascinates me.
I love it. I love it. Well, you did it. You got all 10 questions. You made it, survived, and did well talking about yourself, Thomas. It was
Thank you
good.
very much.
It was
Appreciate
good.
that.
You're welcome. Well, we want everybody to make sure that they go visit thecrisiscompass.com. I know you also just came out with a book, Navigating Beyond Crisis. Can people get the book at your website and everything?
On our website, there's a book launch page. It's not on Amazon deliberately. I chose a different platform, but the link is on that site.
Very good. Very good. What else can they find when they go to the website, Thomas?
Well, they can find our offers. They can find our philosophy a bit, what we can do. They can find the trainings. It's all in a way one package, so it's all related to the book in one way. So the courses and advice that we offer is all on human-centered crisis management and crisis leadership, and we do training, simulations, and advice. So they find a little bit more about us and the people who I work with, of course.
Very good. Very good. Well, we'll definitely need to get a hold of your book, Navigating Beyond Crisis. And also make sure you visit Thomas on his website. It was such a pleasure having you on the show today. It was a lot of fun, really exciting to get to know you. And I'm so thankful. I just want to say on a very personal note for the work that you're doing in the world is so needed.
Thank you very much, Jessica. I mean, it was really, really had a great time. Lots of laughter, and you're an amazing host. Fantastic questions, made me feel really like at ease, and appreciate that. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Absolutely. All right, you guys, it's been another amazing episode of the Breakthrough Show today. I want to thank you all for being here wherever you are in the world. I want to invite you to join our community. Just go to bit.ly/Discord Breakthrough, bit.ly/Discord Breakthrough. We'd love to have you there. We always have lots of silliness going on. We all need a little more laughter these days. And so I really appreciate everybody for being a part of it. And we'd love to have you there as well. I also want to thank everybody who supports our network. You can find out more about that again in our Discord community. And we thank you all so much for that as well. I'm your host, Jessica Dugas, and I want to remind you to make joy a priority in your life and make every day a great day for a breakthrough. We'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.